Okay, thanks, Sally. I'll be talking to you today about how the Historic England Aerial Reconnaissance Programme has developed since 2006 when ours was last in the UK, and also the last time I attended ours. I'll give you an overview of our observer-led aerial reconnaissance and the wide range of targets we're required to survey. I'll also examine how the technology we use has changed since 2006. And at the end, I'll look at the ways we have engaged with the public in publicising our work and making our aerial photos more widely accessible. I won't be talking about drones. We have a lot of drone pilots within Historic England, using them for detailed survey and illustration, which is another talk in itself. So, as ARG has not been to the UK for a while, many of you may not be familiar with our aerial reconnaissance work, so I'll give you a brief overview. So here I am, taking an oblique photograph over the Isles of Scilly. I'm working inside this aircraft here, sitting on the left-hand side next to an open window with the pilot on my right. The aircraft I use is based at Oxford, and the aircraft here, you see on the right, is used by our York team, which is currently Robin Andrews, who you'll hear from later. The aircraft give us the flexibility to cover most of England. Since 2006, we have also funded flyers in Cornwall, Herefordshire, Essex, and somewhere else. Cornwall. The types of survey we're asked to carry out can be split into three main categories. Discovery. By responding to changing weather conditions, we assess the potential for crop mark development on different soils, prioritising opportunities for new discoveries. And then condition monitoring, which is nothing like what we saw in the earlier session this morning. We survey scheduled monuments and registered parks and gardens to help our colleagues in Historic England prioritise sites for field visits. And in terms of architectural survey, we support our architectural specialists with surveys of individual buildings, large industrial complexes and townscapes. The variety of targets provides flexibility to switch from one type of target to another to maximise time in the air. In the winter, we prefer to prioritise condition monitoring of scheduled monuments, but from late February, there is the theoretical potential for germination marks and crop marks to develop on certain geologies. So as we move into spring, we work on buildings photography and sample different geologies for crop mark potential. At this point, we also have access to the soil moisture deficit data from the Met Office and assess Sentinel satellite imagery to help decide when and where to switch to crop mark survey. In the autumn, we return to buildings photography and potentially pick up any crop marks in late maturing crops such as maize and sugar beets. Now you'll spot it here that I'm using a medium format film camera. 2006 was the year we finally transitioned from digital cameras, transitioned from film to digital cameras. So this was the traditional sort of kit we used to have. Rod flex medium format cameras along with two Leica 35mm cameras, and with a portable GPS and occasionally a video camera. We also kept a record of each site that we photographed in this flight report, which was then used to help with cataloguing. In 2006, we switched over to digital completely, starting off with a Canon 20D. Since then, we've updated our cameras with ever-increasing sensor sizes, and here we have a photo of our Nikon D810s, one here, with different lenses that we use for oblique photography, Since I've taken this photograph, I've now used D850 cameras. And this is a D850 camera in the centre, which we use for vertical survey. We've also moved away from paper maps. We take a portable, we take a tablet PC in the air with us that has GIS on it, with lots of different layers, including our NMP data, scheduled monument data, and other sort of target layers. On the cameras, we have also attached a GPS receiver and this box at the bottom, which is an inertial navigation system that records the position and angles of each photograph that is taken. And from this data, we then convert it to center points and footprints in GIS to help us with cataloging. As structure from motion became a more important tool for our mapping and interpretation work, the demand for suitable photography increased. Taking on requests for overlapping oblique photography on small individual sites was not a problem, but increasingly requests for surveys at a landscape scale became more common, such as a project around Bird Oswald Roman Fort on Hadrian's Wall. So the project area was along the wall, and the fort was actually here, and then the project area was over this area here. Once over the survey area, it took 40 minutes to systematically take 1,200 oblique overlapping photographs. And then our colleague Dave Knight created an orthophoto and DSM of the Bird Oswald landscape to help with detail mapping and ground survey work. Now, while this proved to be a very productive survey, the physical and navigational demands of taking so many photos over a large area on an extremely cold January day over Cumbria encouraged me to look at the use of vertical camera to add to our toolkit. Although maybe I should say revisiting a vertical setup is probably a better phrase, because many years ago, the owner of our aircraft, Northern Aircraft, Anthony Crawshaw, who's here in the audience somewhere, adapted an inspection hatch in the belly of the plane to create a bay for a vertical camera. Unfortunately, we didn't use this as much as we would have liked for various reasons. In 2019, we acquired a Nikon D850 for vertical work with an inertial navigation system, the inertial measurement unit of which is attached to the hot shoe of the camera. This contains the accelerometer, gyroscopes, etc. required to record data is then used to calculate the center points of the photographs and footprints. For the Southern aircraft, we don't have the option of fixing a camera to the underside of the aircraft, so we acquired a strut-mounted camera pod. Initially, we used the vertical cameras for assisting with earthwork surveys and condition monitoring at a landscape scale. The first was for a survey of the Malvern Hills in March 2019 to assess visitor erosion along the Shire Ditch, and here's an example of just one of the photos. And here is one of the resulting products from SFM. A year later, of course, was the start of the COVID pandemic. Initially, no flying in light aircraft is allowed, but by May 2020, the rules were relaxed to allow solo flying. So making use of the vertical setup allowed us to continue our crop mark reconnaissance thanks to our pilots, Mick Webb, who flies our Southern aircraft, and Steve Wakeham, flying in the Northern one. On the ground, I assessed the crop stress data and weather conditions and decided where to send Mick. Before each flight, I set up the camera and data in the control unit. Then after Mick returned, I removed the memory card and data from the aircraft. Now, this was an effective way of working in difficult circumstances. It also proved to me the importance of having an archaeologist on board for two main reasons. Firstly, to identify and deal with any problems with the survey equipment and aircraft position. Secondly, more importantly, to make decisions about whether the area selected had developed the crop marks expected, or to extend the survey area if needed. This is also extended to assessing whether to stop or continue if shadow and cloud cover made photography difficult. Now we're now looking at options for upgrading our vertical equipment, as some of the components that were designed for use on drones, especially the wiring and connectors, are not robust enough for use in an aircraft. I'll now give you a flavour of some of the work we've done within the three main categories of targets I mentioned earlier. We contributed to the High Streets Heritage Action Zone programme, which is a government-funded project delivered by Historic England, which aims to unlock the potential of 67 high streets across England, combining investment in buildings and shopfronts with community engagement and cultural events. Working with our architectural investigation colleagues, we took very detailed photographs of the high streets, the majority of which have densely packed, narrow plots with many buildings difficult to view from the ground, especially at the back of the properties. These photographs were then used to help prioritise ground surveys. A large number of our buildings targets have included large industrial complexes that were under threat from closure, such as steelworks, gasworks and power stations, and also nuclear power stations, which are coming to the end of their natural life. And this was all in the context of the country transitioning from carbon to renewable energy. Many of these complexes are too big and difficult to protect. Therefore, we have been using ground and aerial photography to make an extensive record of these complexes before they disappear, including this oil-fired power station at Crawley on the Solent, which has now been demolished. Another major category of building and landscape photography we undertake are registered parks and gardens. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this, as Robin will be talking about this in more detail later, but it brings me on to condition monitoring more generally. In England, there are over 19,000 scheduled monuments in 1,700 registered parks and gardens. These are managed by 6 Historic England regions, each with multiple teams to advise on rural land management work. We help with targeted photography of individual sites, thematic or regional updates. We can't photograph them all, but we set priorities after discussion with the regional teams. We are expected to photograph protected sites between undertaking other tasks as well to maximise time in the air and to report damage. This is just one example of the detailed photography that we provide to colleagues. Here we have 2 round barrows, one of which is under these trees. Both are being clipped by the plough here, and the one on the left has been damaged by badgers, which is not uncommon for many of the barrows in the Oakley World Heritage Site. More of a problem for our colleagues are scheduled monuments in cultivation. Unfortunately, it's either too expensive or not practical for farmers to put scheduled monuments under grass. Ways have to be found to allow farmers to make use of their land without damaging the archaeology. Now, we've provided advice, up-to-date photography, AP and LiDAR interpretation for colleagues to minimise the damage. In simplest form, this involves identifying whether a site has any earthwork survival or not. In this case, there is an earthwork element to this long barrow and the 2 round barrows. Whether there are earthworks or if the site is flat, then defines which of these methods of cultivation on the left is acceptable. Monitoring the type of crops grown is also important, as certain crop types are more damaging than others, especially potatoes and sugar beets. But thankfully, all we have to do is hand over the photos and interpretations to archaeologists who then have to take the requirements. Now, a little more about the discoveries. There isn't time to go through the best years for discoveries, but this is just one example of a late prehistoric settlement recorded in Cambridgeshire in 2011. In 2010 and 2011, we experienced 2 successive years of very warm, dry winters, followed by hot summers, which created ideal conditions for new discoveries in the east on clay soils that are normally limited in what they reveal. And we've prioritised these difficult soils when conditions like this allow. This graph shows the new and amended monument records that we've resulted from our aerial reconnaissance from 2007 to 2020. And you can see the variation in discoveries from year to year, mainly due to variability in the UK weather. 2010 and 11 were particularly memorable. Another memorable year was 2018, when there was a long period of hot easterly winds in the spring and summer that created drought conditions across the whole country. The highest number of discoveries was in the southwest, and here we've one example in Cornwall. We also had some success in the east. This is my favourite discovery in 2018. 2 Neolithic Reconnaissance monuments near Milton Keynes. Part of the one on the left had been spotted before but not identified as a Reconnaissance. The one on the right lay beneath a medieval headland. 2018 was also memorable for the amount of publicity and public appetite for discoveries from the air. With the support of our communications team, we had a very intense week in August 2018 of undertaking newspaper, TV and radio interviews to publicise our work, which is a level of scrutiny and intensity I've never experienced before, to be honest. This was very beneficial for our team and also Historic England more widely, providing positive news for a relatively new organisation. Publicity about the discoveries appeared all around the world. Now, if we look at the graph at the bottom, which depicts the number of visits to the Historic England news stories since the organisation was set up, there's a huge spike at the end there. No doubt many of the visitors to our website would also have been looking at ways to access the photographs online. At this stage, we couldn't give them that, unfortunately. But in 2018, at the same time all this was kicking off, I was working with our IT colleagues to work on a web-based map, which initially started off as using Arch's software, but then we were given the option to use Esri's products, which was really, really useful, especially given the skills we've got in our team with Simon Butchley and his GIS skills, helped us to then create this, what we call the Historic England Aerial Photo Explorer, or APEX for short, which gives you the ability to look at not only the photographs that we take, all our born digital photographs, but also images from our archive that have been scanned, taken by the RAF and the US Army Air Force. When you zoom into an area, you can click on individual points of footprints or use the query function to find batches of thumbnails to scroll through, and then photos can be viewed in detail. And there are also various social media sharing tools. The launch of APEX in 2022 became the best Historic England news story, with a huge number of visits to the APEX site, and it brought a huge increase in traffic to the rest of the Historic England website. These figures are for the first 6 months of the launch. Now that the initial excitement has settled down, APEX is still one of the most popular web pages, with 1.3 million page views in the last 12 months. This shows an appetite. Shows what an appetite there is for aerial photography, which is something we can possibly throw into the discussion tomorrow afternoon. Now, finally, I just want to finish with this slide of our former colleague Roger Featherstone, who sadly passed away earlier this year. I will be grateful to Roger for the training and support he gave me when I started flying in 1998, and also leaving me with a well-established aircraft operation with a loyal team of pilots. We'll all miss his enthusiasm and joyful life. He loved attending ARG, and he would have really been pleased to have it back in the UK. And if he was here now, he'd be telling me to shut up and say, let's have some lunch. Right.